I'm Melanie Ramdarshan, one of the Take Flight Hub coordinators, and I'm super delighted to be here today to chair this panel with this excellent group of agents. We have Davinia Andrew-Lynch, the founder of Andlyn Literary Agency and former freelance children's fiction editor. The elusive Elise Dillsworth, founder of the Elise Dillsworth Agency and former commissioning editor at Virago Press, in her first and possibly the last Zoom appearance. Emma Paterson, an agent at Aitken Alexander Associates and former bookseller Rising Star. So this is going to be a real kind of practical Q&A session. This panel of agents who work across different genres and with award-winning writers will give you practical tips about approaching an agent, insights into the author-agent relationship, and tell you what they're looking for right now. We'll start with a panel discussion and then open it up for audience questions at the end. So please feel free to join the conversation with questions and comments in the chat function and on Twitter using our Take Flight Hub hashtag. So to enable us to distinguish what is a question and what is a comment, can we ask you to put your questions in all caps, like you're shouting at us, and do remember to make sure the question is put to everyone rather than individuals in the chat, because it's just a lot easier to monitor. And just a wee reminder that this webinar is being recorded. So to begin with, Davinia, Elise and Emma, and maybe we can start in that order. Can you tell us a wee bit about yourself and the kind of books and authors that you represent?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Davinia Andrew-Lynch, and as Melanie said, I run Andlyn. I've been going for about 5 years. I was formerly a film and TV agent as well as doing children's fiction editing. So the agency predominantly represents children's authors, mainly fiction, but then I have a very small handful of adult fiction authors. I tend to lean towards the very commercial. I think because my film and TV background, I quite like, you know, blockbuster, bold stories, very entertaining, kind of, you know, for the masses kind of stories, really. And that's me, to be honest.
Hi, I'm Elise Dillsworth, and I was previously a commissioning editor at Virago Press. I set up my agency in 2012, and my authors are predominantly writing for literary fiction market, and that is a reflection of my taste as well. So it's novels and short story collections, and in cookery writers, I represent quite a few of those. I'm looking to broaden that out a bit more to do some non-narrative fiction and hopefully autobiography and memoir and maybe travel writing and some crossover into commercial at the end of high end towards literary.
I'm Emma Paterson. I'm an agent at Aitken Alexander, where I've been for almost 2 years-ish. And before that, I was an agent at Rogers Coleridge and White, and my list is pretty evenly split between non-fiction and fiction. On the fiction side, it's predominantly literary, I mean, it's all literary fiction, and that includes, like Elise, novels and short stories. And on the non-fiction side, it's broader. So I do some illustrated, like maybe one illustrated book every 18 months. And then I represent quite a lot of journalists, some academics, and I also represent some poets.
Brilliant. You represent Mary Jean, who gave an amazing masterclass a couple of months ago. She was fantastic. So obviously a lot of people here this evening are fairly new to the industry, and you know this is an opportunity to kind of demystify some of the things that you say that you do. How would you explain the role of the literary agent to someone who is new to the industry? Elise, maybe you want to start, or maybe we'll do Emma and Davinia.
I'd say that an agent is your advocate and your advisor, and they're the channel between you and potential publishers, and their job is really to manage your literary career and you know, put your work with the, you know, the right publishers and get the best deals that we can for you, and to exploit all avenues. And that's not just for the physical book, but for film and TV and foreign rights. So just exploiting all avenues and basically building your career. Thoughts?
Do you want to hear from me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I completely agree. And the way I sometimes try to think of it or communicate it to authors is that I try to position myself as their kind of avatar in the publishing world, so that I'm kind of always there to represent and communicate in their best interests, so that they can be left alone to focus on the creative work.
That's true, actually. I suppose that's what, you know, representation means. You're actually representing that person. So I think that's quite a good way of putting it as an avatar.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, really. I suppose I usually say we're your champion, but we're also very honest with you, and we'll give you hard truths if necessary. If something's not up to scratch, we'll need to tell you that. If you have unrealistic expectations, because I think, you know, it's quite easy to lose sight of reality. It's not just about getting the book deal. You know, there's so many steps after that. And for me, I really want to work with people for a long time. So obviously communication is key, but it's also understanding what kind of agent you want and ensuring you're on the same page. But in everything I do, you know, we're thinking about our authors all the time. It's not just on the clock. So we have to really believe in you and believe that we can get you to where, you know, you want to be and where we think you deserve to be as well. Which is always, you know, preferably at the top, but it takes time. So, you know, we're the ones who will keep pushing you when you're thinking, oh, there's no point doing this anymore, but there is, because, you know, we believe in your writing, really, at the end of the day.
So that author agent relationship is fascinating to me, especially, you know, you're not, and you just mentioned that there, Davinia, you know, you're not always going to click with everyone, and you might not be the right agent for a particular author, even though it, you know, they fall within your kind of remit of what you're looking for. And all of you, to some extent, represent authors across very different genres. Elise, I didn't know that you represented cookery.
Yeah. Well, what's better than eating and reading?
There's nothing better than eating and reading. And I've been doing far too much of both.
Yeah, no, I do. I've got, I think, 3. So there's Zoe's Ghana Kitchen, so that's Ghanaian cooking. There's Vanessa Bolose, who did Creole Kitchen, and that's from Guadeloupe and Martinique. And I have a Somali cookery writer, and I've just recently taken on a writer from Sierra Leone, which is where I come from. Yeah. And so, yeah.
So when you know, you're all working with writers across different genres. So it's not specifically is it specifically the writer that the writing that you're looking for? I suppose my question is, what are the most important qualities are you on the lookout in a new author? Emma, do you want to start this time?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, the writing is incredibly important, and I guess we might get on to how an author submits to an agent, and there is a very kind of tried and tested formulaic way to do that, which usually puts quite a lot of focus on the covering email, you know, the email that you send with your manuscript. But I kind of believe that you can write an incredibly good covering email, but at the end of the day, it is about what's in what you attach, what's the manuscript is like. So that's a very kind of basic requirement, I guess, for me. But then I usually feel quite inspired by is the sense that an author is very intentional about what they're doing. And so that's why it's so important to, well, you know, pre-COVID would be important to meet if possible, at least to speak to them, because the work is incredibly important, but I find it is also meaningful to sort of understand why the writer has written a particular piece of work, like how they want it to exist in the world, what they want it to do, how they want readers to respond to it. I find that important for me, and then to feel in some way that there's a synergy between their intentions and what I imagine their intentions are, as well, to feel like the chemistry is there.
Yeah, I agree with what Emma said. I think it's what I said earlier about, I suppose, the shared vision comes into all of that. And also, I think, yes, you have to meet them, in person if you can. If you have authors that live abroad, then you can't, so you have to Skype or whatever. But also, I think it's make sure that you get on. The work is important, but it is going to be a long relationship. I think, as Davinia said, it's sort of like a marriage. It's, you're the business partner, but you're the friend. You might be the therapist. But, it's a very kind of unusual relationship in a way, I think. And also I think it's about managing expectations as well, and just make sure that, they know what to expect and what, you're going to expect. So it's managing expectations, and it's communication and trust and everything like that, I think, as well.
Yeah. It's a really intense relation. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Carry on.
Yeah. It's a really intense relationship, I think. That I have some authors which I speak to quite regularly, and then I have others who I don't speak to for a long time. It may not be a draft, and they may take quite a while to produce that draft, and we have that understanding. I think, in terms of understanding whether the agent is for you as well is such a huge thing, and kind of is, yes, there's a personality click situation, but I think it's what you want from that business relationship, just like anything you go into. And I think I said it earlier, but if you're wanting someone who's there, who can be there, 24 hours a day, and there are some agents like that, then, for instance, I may not be that person because I have something else going on in my life which also has to be balanced out. And everybody has their different personal situations which have to be considered. And that applies to both the agent and the writer as well.
I think we all have probably authors that, there are some authors that don't need you to be in touch with them every week. So it's, you tailor it to your different author, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And also, I think when you're choosing an agent, I mean, hopefully you've got a lot of choice, but I will say that even if someone comes to me and then they choose someone else, it's not because I'm not a bad agent, I'm just not the right agent for that person. So I think that's also sort of bear in mind, Yeah. It's not that anyone's bad, it's just that it's not the right fit at that.
Absolutely. And if you're saying that it's a marriage, you don't want to be trapped in a bad marriage.
And I've seen good, people who've written brilliant things, and I just know, though, I wouldn't be the right person for them. And I've said as such, but I always try to encourage when I can, just to say, don't give up, there will be the right match for you. It's just literally that I know I don't have the vision for your type of writing, even though I completely recognise it's brilliant. Especially say I've had literary kind of submissions, and I just know I wouldn't know what to do with it, but I can completely see that it's brilliant writing, so hold fast. Find the right one.
The right one is out there somewhere. So aside from referrals, where do you actually find your authors?
Well, I think through our websites, and also through prizes and awards, creative writing courses, attending their events that they hold quite regularly, and just being proactive as well, looking for people. But I do find quite a few through awards and prizes, whether that's through judging or just keeping an eye out. And as I say, creative writing courses and referrals, as you've said.
Yeah, and I was saying to someone today that I think that for all its evils, the Twitter algorithm has served me really well, because I think through sort of it's gradually attaching myself to particular writing communities via Twitter, it now tends to show me people who I am naturally very interested in, and because I do represent quite a lot of nonfiction. A lot of the time it is about finding an expert voice on something, so I do I follow them and then hope that they follow me back and I can send them a message on Twitter. But yeah, like Elise, also unsolicited, so slush pile submissions through the website, yeah, referrals, MAs, reading as much as possible, prizes, yeah.
I've actually found a couple of people through going to conferences and doing one-to-ones actually, and having met them. And it might be the case that the material that they've submitted hasn't been the right one, but then they've gone off and worked on something else and then presented that, and that's been the right match. So I've known that there could be something there, or, you know, I didn't feel, you know, a particular text was the right one, or, you know, wasn't the right story, but could completely see the merit of the writing. And then, yeah, and then just said, you know, please do get back in touch, and they have done, which is always great. And then, you know, I've met one of my very first authors I met at a conference, and we kind of hit it off straight away, and they hadn't even finished their manuscript. So I said, let's kind of work on it together and see how it goes, and it's done really well, and that's really exciting. And I think that comes back to the meeting somebody the first time. You know, when you see work you like, you do need to meet them to know that you get on. So I think one-to-ones are a great opportunity for that, really. And then also for the author, because then they get to kind of practice their pitch and know if it works or not. So.
I just want to ask a question about some of the, just for the emerging authors who might not know this, what prizes or conferences should they be looking out for, you know, to submit their work to or to attend?
Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends what they're writing. So I'm sure Elise and I both look at, well, lots of the different short story prizes. There are some that are very visible, there are some that are less visible, so things like that. And then, you know, it's not even necessarily about winning the prize, but a long listing or a short listing. And it will draw attention to your work. And also when you're writing to an agent, you know, often lots of people have submitted to lots of different prizes and have been, you know, variously long-listed, shortlisted, or won, and just that kind of cumulative impact, I think, of recognition across lots of prizes can draw your attention to their work.
I mean, like Emma says, there's lots of things out there. You have to find the right prize for your kind of writing. But yes, and also, you know, when I've looked at things, I've not necessarily gone for the winner. You know, I might have someone that's on a short list. So, as Emma said, you know, long listing, short listing is just as important, and you know, it will come to someone's attention. And as I said, I don't necessarily go for the winner. But yeah, you've got to sort of tailor it to what you're writing. There's a lot out there, and you know, Google's your friend. It's, you know, find lots of things there. But yeah, there's loads of prizes, some visible, others not so much.
Yeah.
So proactively start submitting your work for prizes, etc.
Yeah, and lots of those prizes now are offering a certain number of free submissions. So if you know, if paying for it excludes you from being able to participate, there are some free places.
Good point. Yeah.
I think on the children's side, you know, you have the Bath Children's Novel Prize, which is a good one, and you know, again, I always look at the shortlisted or long-listed groups, and then I run the Fab Prize with Faber, which is specifically for writers of Black, Asian, minority ethnic and groups, and I've actually taken on one author who was from the commended section. I just really liked her material, and it needed a lot of work, but for me, it completely chimed. And we'd met just by happenstance in a couple of other ways, and so again, that was just quite fortuitous, really. In terms of conferences, you know, obviously Words of Colour have done brilliant events, but then also there's Jericho Writers. I found they're quite good. There was the Winchester's Writer Festival, which that's actually, I think, closed down now. So there's been a replacement called the Writers Weekend, which this year happened in a virtual way. But that's been great. You know, I think Also, you should look at the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, which is a brilliant community for children's authors and illustrators, and they have a conference and do loads of events with a lot of agents quite regularly. So that can be a good way to get your foot in the door at least, and start kind of maybe creating, you know, opportunities for conversation with different people.
Brilliant, thank you. Emma, you alluded to the query letter earlier on, and obviously it's a, you know, in some instances, the first approach that you would have for an agent. So when you're looking at query letters, what are some of the things that make you sit up and pay attention, and what can aspiring authors do to make their submissions more attractive?
Well, I think it's a difficult one. I think what's quite useful for me, and I can only really speak for myself, but is to know why the writer is writing to me in particular, and that's not out of vanity. It's just because that sort of that immediately starts to establish a rapport. If they communicate that there is something about their work that they think speaks to other work that you represent. So that to me is quite important. You know, usually they do include a blurb that might look something like a blurb that you would find on the back of a published book, to kind of entice you, and then some information about who they are, and that should include all of the kind of writing activity that they've done, any kind of prize recognition, where they've been published. But I sort of say all this whilst also believing that, honestly, that for me it doesn't really matter. If I really love the work, I mean, for example, I think it was last year, I received a submission through our Unsolicited, and it had very little information in it at all. Maybe a couple of lines, no information really about the author. The author hadn't published anywhere before. And we aimed to read everything that comes in, and read that, and the work was just incredibly strong. And so I was in touch with the author immediately. So there are all of these rules and then all of these exceptions to them. So, but you know, I hope that's not confusing. I mean that to be helpful and open rather than to totally confuse everyone.
Yeah, well, I think what Emma said is correct. I think she's probably more generous than I am, because if I get called Elsie, I delete. So, you know, the name's Elise, not Elsie. It's liable to send me crazy. But seriously, yeah, I mean, you know, it is a writing, but, you know, just follow the submission guidelines. You know, it's amazing how many people won't do that, or, you know, will send you something that's, you know, you don't represent. So just, I think you've got to treat it with the same sort of seriousness as you would, I think we all say this, as a job application. You know, get the right person that you want, spell their name correctly, you know, and as Emma said, you know, why are you writing to that particular agent? You know, that's the key thing. And, you know, if they ask for 3 chapters, send 3 chapters. And then you're, as Emma said, I mean, I really can't improve what Emma said, really.
I think it's often easier to say what not to do.
Yeah.
What to do right.
Okay, and I suppose that's my next question then. So what do you have any big do's and don'ts? And
Don't call me Elsie, I've told you already.
Elsie, I know. So what are the common mistakes that you see, and what would you know, what would happen that you would reject them immediately? You know, obviously calling you Elsie, not doing the research to find out what your name is, for example.
Get very angry or arrogant letters, and when I say arrogant, in terms of, so I always think it can be really good to have comparisons in your letter, like, you know, you feel that this could work in the market alongside something else. But if you say to me, as like an obvious example, because it's children, if you say to me this is going to be the next Harry Potter, how do you know that? Do you know how it started? It was actually really slow to get off the ground. Like, you know, there are so many things there which I find it just feels like unimaginative. And it does also make me wonder whether you know the market, because Harry Potter's actually quite old now. I think it's going up to 20 years old. Yeah. It came out when I was 11. So like, you know, I want to know that you know the market, and that's quite clear that you perhaps don't. Getting the name wrong, or saying "Dear Sir," when, you know, I'm the only agent there. I'm definitely a woman. You know, and things like that. I think that can be rather annoying, or just and not, this isn't annoying, but I just say having a really long letter isn't helpful, because, you know, we just want to kind of know, at the end of the day, know what the book is about and whether it kind of appeals to us. And unfortunately, giving us your life story at that point is not when we need to see it, really. So I'd say just keep it succinct, you know, and maybe it's my film background, but having a log line or a premise which is 2-3 sentences is usually sufficient for me, anyway. But,
yeah.
I actually do have one. I've just remembered. I find it really frustrating if someone submits one manuscript but then at the end says, if this one doesn't appeal, then I also have X, Y, and Z, and sometimes they attach them, and that goes back to my earlier point about something feeling intentional. I just want a submission that feels like you know why you're writing to this particular agent, and you know what you are sending them and what you want to be published and what you want to work on for the next, year, 2 years. Sending lots of other options just makes it feel like that kind of focus is missing, basically, and I find that a very off-putting approach.
yeah.
And also, I mean, we all know this is, make sure you've got it to the point where it's as finished as you can get it. The amount of things I've had that I'll get a submission, and then a day, even a week later or 2 weeks later, oh, I've done some more work on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not good, you know. It's, you know, you have limited time, so make sure you've got it to the point where you think you can't do any more work. I mean, it may need more work, but get it to the point where you think you've got it to the best of your ability, and then send it.
Or when you've got 3 chapters and you do ask for more and they say the novel's not finished. And that's really frustrating, because depending on how long it's going to take, and invariably it'll take a while, you know, we only get to read something for the first time once. So you kind of lose that opportunity. You lose the anticipation and the excitement that the agent has for your book at that moment. It's not to say that the book isn't great when they read it later, but it's just the missing of an opportunity. And also it's taking up time, which we've used up, and, you know, it's not like we have loads of time, not in a offish way, but, you know, we've got to get through everything, you know, so that makes sense.
And as Emma was saying, you know, you want to know why you're going to that particular agent, or why, you know, you're coming to me. And when you're looking at all the agencies, I mean, you've got the big agencies, you've got small agencies, you've got independent agencies, you know, your relationship's going to be with that agent. So, you know, you can see it might be a big agency, but remember that your relationship is with that particular agent, as well as everything that the whole agency can offer you as well. Yeah.
Okay, so imagine, you know, you have an author who's jumped all these hurdles. They've got your name right. They've sent a succinct email that really speaks to you and the work that you've been doing, and your kind of list of authors. What are the next steps after, you know, being offered representation?
A lot of editing from my part, I think, and that's usually, I think, for a lot of agents, really, because we want to, for me, I really like to get the book to, you know, again, the best place it can be, because like the editors are in a similar position to us, you know, they only read something, or have little time to read lots of new things because they're already working on other projects, but whilst they're obviously acquiring things, you know, they want to see something which they can have a vision for as well. So you want to give them the best opportunity to see that, really. So I think editing is a huge amount, or a huge part of it. Never think once you've got it to where you think it's the best that is it. Because also when it gets taken on by the editor, hopefully, and a publisher, they'll also be editing with you as well. It's a long process, really.
Yeah, that's it. That's the same for me. Lots and lots of editing, and how long we're editing for will obviously depend on each manuscript, but will also depend on how much time is available to the writer. So it can happen in a very concentrated period of time, or over the course of a year even. But yeah, a real focus on editorial at the beginning.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I mean, you've all kind of touched upon this a wee bit already, but you know, what can your authors expect from the author-agent relationship? And has this changed over the course of your career?
I don't know. I think, as I said before, that it's, you know, it's a shared vision for the books that, you know, the writer's going to produce, that you've got the same vision and the same goal for that. As I say, trust, you know, communication. You know, as we've all said, it's a very sort of unusual relationship in that it's a business relationship, but it's also a friendship as well, I think, to a certain degree. Yeah. Don't know, we've got Emma, Davinia.
Then Emma, Davinia, do you want to?
I think support, personally, that, you know, is supposed to be supportive. As Elise really just said, and I don't think there's much more that can be added to that. And, you know, we're the people who also will sometimes play devil's advocate, you know, we'll kind of set things straight for you, we'll bring you down to earth when necessary. But I think honesty always has to be key, for me anyway, and I think every agent, to be honest, and that's from both parties as well. And the other thing I'll always say, I actually remember a while back going to an event and someone had an agent, and they actually said that they were quite scared of them, and I found that quite worrying, really, because again, it's supposed to be a friendship, and yes, you can have respect for somebody, but they're not a god. You should be able to question them. You should be able to ask questions at any time and about anything, really. You know, they'll explain to you what you think is maybe a stupid question, but it's not. You know, we're there to kind of guide you through this whole process, really. If that's...
We were providing a service, you know, so, you know, you're there to ask as many questions, you know, we're there providing a service to you, so that's what it sort of should be.
Yeah.
And as Emma said, you know, the writer's relationship with their editor, they doesn't be focused on their writing, so we are there to be dealing with everything else. You know, if there's a problem, we'll deal with it, but we're there to oversee and make sure that everything is running, you know, smoothly, and we're the channel between you and the publisher. And as you know, we're your advocate, we're your champion. You said.
I'm just reading the chat and there are so many amazing questions. I think I'm going to ask one last question and go on to the audience questions. So just to finish with my questions, what is the one piece of advice that you regularly give to authors at the beginning of their careers?
Sorry, Emma.
No. Sorry, I was sort of sighing in thinking about it. No. Just taking stock. No, you go.
Yeah, at least if you've got.
I suppose, I don't know. In a nutshell, I mean, I think. Well, I don't know. I have, like, you know, we all know the basic 3 R's that we're all taught at school, but I suppose just be reasonable, realistic, and resilient. You know, it's a tough world. There's a lot to deal with. You know, we live in a world of rejection, but you know, if you believe in your work, and you know, we believe in it too. You know, I think, just be reasonable, realistic, and resilient.
Yeah.
I'd add to that another R, research. Research your market, research who you're sending your work to. You know, every possibility for research, do it, really. And that will put you in good stead in going forward, I think.
Emma, your R? It's got to be an R.
I was going to add respectful.
Yeah.
Seeing as we need
Important.
another R, but I think that's really important, because I think it, you know, it is an increasingly competitive landscape, and although we're not the ones writing the work, and of course we're not exposed in the same way that the writer is, but we are, you know, we are sort of exposing ourselves, and we are working as hard as we can, and we're always doing it in the interests of the writer. So believing that that's the case is a really important beginning to the relationship, and builds
Absolutely.
trust. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the participants now. So we've had a couple of questions about genres, and I think there's some degree of confusion between different types of fiction. So Sarah Hamilton has asked, could panelists explain the difference between literary fiction, commercial fiction, and commercial literary fiction? And should writers worry about categorizing their work in this way before pitching to agents? If anyone wants to jump in.
I don't know. Well, I suppose thinking about my own taste, when I say I like literary fiction, I suppose I like work that is character-led rather than plot-driven. So that's maybe something that might help differentiate away between literary and commercial.
I was going to say the opposite. So stories to be really, for commercial, I like them to be really plot driven. That's what I tend to be looking for.
That's what I said. That's what I meant.
Yeah, sorry, no, I mean that my preference is.
Your preference. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm looking for things which are quite plot driven. I do like well-rounded characters, but I need to see a really strong story, active story going through there, to be honest. And I think that works for most genres within the commercial area, really.
And I like both. It has to be character led, and often has to be, for me, writing led. So I'm interested in people who are, you know, paying attention to their sentences and the forms that they're writing, and sometimes, you know, kind of subverting. So those things, and questions of style, I guess.
So another genre-related question from Pamela. How do you feel about representing an author who writes both fiction as well as poetry?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah.
pretty good if they're both good. Yeah, if the poetry's good and the fiction's good. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think that writers need to be hemmed in by any of those categories, and lots of the writers I work with move from poetry to essay, poetry to fiction, the other way around. I think you can do whatever you set your mind to, really.
Yeah, it's true. It wouldn't stop me representing some of this. You know, as Emma said, I have writers that do novels and they do short stories too. I have an author who does poetry as well. So yeah, it wouldn't stop. It's not a barrier.
I think for me, I'd have to see the poetry, just because that's not an area I usually represent. I suppose another example, if it was someone writing children's and commercial adult fiction, I'd be more than happy to represent across that divide, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Emma, this is a question specifically for you, but I'm sure the rest of you can speak to it as well. This is from Denise. For poetry books, how much of a manuscript would be needed?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I have to say, so in the case, I only represent a handful of poets, and usually it's the whole collection that I've had before taking them on. Sometimes the collection has actually been published, but without an agent's involvement. So that's quite common. That a poetry publisher has commissioned the poet directly, and then the collection gets quite a lot of good attention or some prize attention, and then I'm aware of the poet and their work, and we'll take them on for the work that will follow that first collection. Given you mentioned Mary Jean Chan, actually with Mary Jean, I only read 2 poems, but I read them in the, I keep forgetting what the name of this is, but at the end of your creative writing MA, when the work is collected, I can't.
Creative showcase.
Yes, exactly, a showcase, and I encountered her work that way, and then was in touch with her, having read I think 2 or 3 poems featured in that. But that's quite unusual, and most of the time I want to see at least maybe a published pamphlet or a full collection.
Okay, another genre-related question. This is from Ibieri. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Hello, is there really a market for short stories, or is the preference for novels?
Elise, you take that one.
Yeah, there is a market for short stories. As I say, I have a couple of authors that do both. Usually, I suppose, I mean, Emma might agree or disagree with this, that a publisher likes to have both, and I usually want to see that author has got a novel as well, for whatever reason. But I think they are probably getting more popular now. But as I say, you know, my authors do both, and they're both taken seriously, I think, and have got, you know, the same kind of reception. I'm not sure what, I mean, people always say it's very difficult to do short stories here in the UK, and I've never really understood why that is. I think maybe part of the reason is that, as a, you know, in comparison to maybe the States, they have a lot more journals and maybe, you know, places where you can actually place short stories or short form. No, I think the appetite is strong for them. So.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, and I would definitely agree that a lot of the time it does seem that publishers will want some sense of what a novel of a first novel after the collection, that can either come in the form of a novel synopsis or a sample from a novel, and we'll try and buy 2 books at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, so there are a couple of questions about self-publishing as well. This is from Anna. How do agents feel re-self-publish works which are receiving a lot of attention? And then as an add-on to that, someone else had asked, you know, when I'm submitting a query, could I list my self-published works? Anyone who wants to take that, just jump in.
I think it depends. For me, I think it depends on the project. It depends on the interest that you're getting, I guess, where it's from. You know, what. It really depends. You know, in terms of sales, it's not necessarily just that, and also obviously I have to like the work in the first place. That's another big part of it. You know, there are projects. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head at the moment. Sorry, children in the background. Which have started off as self-published, you know, stories, and have done really, really well, and gone to traditional publishers, sold well, and they've built. Say that again.
I said Planet Omar.
Yeah, exactly. And so it does happen, and it can work, but it has to be the right project. And I think, you know, bear that in mind, and also bear in mind what the market is doing at the moment and what people are looking for, I guess, and that comes back to research. So.
Yeah. I don't have a huge amount of experience of that, but in answer to the second question, yeah, absolutely. Just if you're querying an agent, then by all means include all the information on what you've written and published, whether it's, you know, self-published or not.
Same answer as Emma. I don't have much experience, but
Okay, so there's quite a few questions about access to the industry and access to agents. Jade's written a great question, actually. Is there a preference for authors who live in London? I'm based in Yorkshire and a disabled parent to a small child. The pandemic has enabled me to access all of these online events that I previously couldn't have attended, and my writing has flourished. I'm concerned that after this, those with accessibility issues might be disadvantaged again. So if anyone wants to speak to that.
Well, you know, hopefully I think that the pandemic has taught a lot of us that there are a lot more ways to be creative and to be productive and do things. So I'm hoping that we will learn something through this, and that we can use this new sort of accessibility and not just go back to the old ways, that we'll still use these things so it's a benefit to people like the lady that's just asked that question. That, you know, we will still have these channels because they obviously work. So I think we need to sort of, you know, use what we've learned in this pandemic and use the things that we've had to do more creative to go forward. So hopefully the things that have enabled her to be more productive and get her work out there will still remain in place.
Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Someone asked a question which I love. So you've all talked about you know, the agent author relationship as a kind of marriage and wanting to have this sort of long-term relationship with your authors. And someone's written, well, what if the author's over 60? What does that mean? Can you still take on another? I love that question. Whoever wrote that question, I love that.
Well, the answer is yes, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Marriages for elder. We support marriages for elder. So there was another one as well about, you know, UK specific. What if you're you know, an author who lives outside of the UK, or you're writing content that is outside of the UK? You know, would that deter a UK based agent from representing you?
Absolutely not. A lot of my authors are not, well, my authors are based, some based here and some are based South Africa and other countries. So it doesn't make anything exclude, not an exclusion that way. I think it can be based anywhere. I suppose the only thing I probably don't represent is maybe writers in the US, because they have, you know, they're quite established agents there. So I would probably think twice about someone that's writing from the US to me here as to why they want a UK agent. But no, as I say, my authors are from all over.
Yeah, I completely agree. And actually, I think it would be, I mean, it wouldn't be dull, but I think it would be a real shame to restrict your representation to writers who are only based here. And the only thing I would say is that in some ways it does come down again to what the author, the kind of how the author imagines the relationship, because I know that for some authors they do, well, obviously the pandemic has reshaped all of that, but for some authors they do want to be able to see their agent and to do editorial feedback in person, and that's important to them. And if that's the case, then obviously it makes sense to try and choose an agent that you can have that kind of contact with. But for most, yeah, it's happening on email, on the phone, on Skype, now on Zoom. So yeah, I don't feel restricted at all.
The only thing I would say about the children's market, is that here I think, or for children, a lot of publishers will want authors to kind of go around schools and, you know, do visits like that, because that's hugely important in terms of, you know, finding your readership. So it can be difficult. And, you know, within that area, I would think twice. And it would very much, I suppose, depend on the universality of the story, really. But that would be my only kind of big questioning of it within that area of the market.
Okay, we have, unsurprisingly, given the sort of ongoing conversations about representation and underrepresentation, we've got a couple of questions about this lack of representation. So we've got from Moyette, do you think it's true that publishers and white agents are really open to Black debut writers as they're claiming to be at the moment?
I think some are.
Yeah, and I think some are. I think some have always been.
Yeah.
I think it. Yeah, I mean, I want to sort of sound encouraging and to kind of leave people feeling motivated, I suppose. But I think what I would say is I do think it's more important than ever to not to sign up with an agent too quickly. If you have a number of offers of representation, to engage with all of those offers meaningfully, so that you can feel confident, or as confident as possible that you're making that you're choosing someone who understands the work, who is looking to represent a career rather than a book. And just so you have more time to kind of establish what the agent's priorities really seem to be. So to take it, just to not to feel too impatient about rushing into a relationship, just to make sure that you know they're representing you well, basically.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of great questions about sort of new modes of authorship as well from Scarlett. So Scarlett has written, does having a large amount of social media following impact an author's decision to represent an agent's decision to represent an author?
No, in my case, absolutely not. I don't care whether you're on Twitter or Instagram, it's the writing, and it doesn't bother me. I mean, maybe, I don't think for fiction, maybe for non-fiction, depending on what you're writing, it might be important to see that you've got audience out there. So in that way it might impact, but for me, not with fiction, it doesn't make a difference to me.
Anyone else?
Same, it's a bonus really, if it, you know, but if the writing's not up to scratch, then I'm not really going to go for it, so it doesn't matter.
I think if you'd like to be on social media, if you'd like to do, you know, and you engage with it, then it's fine. But I think that some authors might feel a pressure that, oh, I have to be on Twitter. No, you don't. Do it if you want to do it.
Yeah.
And like Emma already said, you know, it's actually a really great way to join the conversation and meet people as well.
Yeah.
If you are so inclined to be on social media. So there's another question about representation. Is there a market for Black non-fiction writers, intellectuals who are not writing about Black history, culture, society? I'm a Black woman journalist and former academic, and I work in geopolitics, an area dominated by affluent white men. So essentially, do Black people have to write about issue-based?
Anybody can write whatever they like. You should know you don't have to write about, you know, issues relating to race or anything. I think write what you want to write, and there's an audience out there, you'll find it. So write exactly what you want to write. And there are agents out there like us here who are more than receptive to that.
And we'll find the editors in turn who are also receptive to that.
Mm-hmm.
So another question about the long-term relationship with your writers. So what would you do if your writer's work is really difficult to sell? Would you keep believing in them?
Yeah, of course.
Not a one-hit wonder kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you see the potential ultimately. You sell that first book, that's great. And that's why, you know, Elise said resilience and, you know, patience. It can take time, you know. I had an author whose first manuscript came to me, and we went out twice with it actually, and it, you know, she started working on a second book, but I still believed in that first, and we got it sold in a really good way. But she had moved on. We had already started thinking about that next project and stuff. But I didn't stop thinking about her or her potential. I wanted to help her realize her dream. So you stick with that. It can take time. Being an agent is a risk, actually. That's what I wanted to say earlier. We take that risk in terms of taking on somebody and kind of backing them. It's not a given that project will go ahead. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And someone's asked on the back of that, someone's asked a great question, saying, what's the most misunderstood part of being an agent?
Well, that's probably
what's most misunderstood about your job?
Oh, I think that's probably the kind of the cliched understanding of that agents spend all their time reading, which we do read a lot, but actually I rarely spend kind of the 9 to 5 or 6 day reading. A lot of the day is actually incredibly reactive, and then some of that kind of slower thinking time happens in evenings, at weekends, or you have to kind of block out the time. So that, I think that's a misconception.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, this is a lovely question. So this is from Daniel. The agent's life sounds like a tough slog, but rewarding. My day as a job as corporate publicist, I see a lot of problems and issues that you're discussing in my client. Can you give me your most joyful moment in your career so far? Have you had that golden egg moment when you found a book that you knew was going to do wonders, and did your gut instinct prove you right?
I think quite a few books. I think when you take something on and, when you're helping someone go from manuscript to finished book, and maybe they get shortlist or long list or, win a prize, I think is that, but just actually seeing a finished book, and I think it's that satisfaction for the author. So that's always joyful. I don't think there's one particular instance, but I think it's, the joy is just from realizing an author's dream, and you've been on that journey with them. And the icing is that they get recognition and prizes and everything like that. But
yeah, I agree. And yeah, no, exactly the same. I mean, yeah, that's the case with Mary Jean. You see two poems. It's not very much work, but there's some connection is made, and then years later, she's won the Costa. So it's just, that kind of, that keeps you going.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I touched on mine with that book. It's Viper by Bex Hogan, and as I say, it took 2 years to get off the ground. And this is where it's quite an emotional job, because when we finally got that offer, I cried just from the sheer relief, because I just couldn't understand why no one wasn't, they weren't picking up this book, which on paper was incredibly commercial. It was what everyone was going for, and she really deserved it because she was such a fantastic writer. Ticked all the boxes, and and she worked incredibly hard. And it is that, I still remember the night when her submission came in, and I remember reading it, that, asking for it the full manuscript the next day, reading that overnight and offering representation. It's just, it's that long journey and all that anticipation and expectation, and, it may not necessarily be our baby, but it's close to it. Basically, you want to see it succeed, really.
I think that is a lovely note to end on. Thank you so much, and thanks to everyone. Before we leave, I just want to remind participants to fill out the survey, which will be circulated after the session ends. And just a final thanks to the brilliant Davinia, Elise. Oh, sorry. What was it? Elsie. Oh yeah,
Elsie.
Davinia, Elsie.
Bye. I'm leaving.
Well, that was just a really super interesting and informative and helpful conversation. So I'm just extend a huge thanks to you all for that brilliant conversation. And of course, thank you all so much to the attendees as well for your contribution. And goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Davinia. Bye, Emma.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good evening.
And you.
Bye.